Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Sweden and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel many times before. I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the last couple of years. They are still a relatively new addition to the Swedish beer scene, but in the last few years they have become very well known and very well respected. I would say that this brewery is best known for their different kinds of New England hazy, whatever you want to call them, IPAs, but in more recent times, they have been experimenting a little bit and trying different things. So it's going to be exciting to see what direction this brewery takes over the next little while. But the beer we're going to have a look at today is one of their latest releases through Systembolaget here in Sweden. It's a style that I know these guys can do very, very well. So needless to say, I am very curious to see what it's going to have in store for us. So hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Örebro, out to the west of Stockholm, and we're going to have a look at another beer from Apex Brewing Company. So this particular beer comes in at 6.5% ABV. It's called Nuclear Option, and this is another New England hazy, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So this beer was released as part of the Localt Osmoskorrekt assortment through Systembolaget here in Sweden for October of 2022, and I think it was available through Glassbanken.se for a little bit more time before that. But yeah, very curious to see what it's going to have in store for us. This one has a little bit of a different hop bill compared to other ones that we've had from Apex in recent times, so that should be quite interesting because the malt base in this one is quite similar to some of the other ones that we've had. But we always get really good New England IPAs from Apex, so it's always interesting to try out their latest releases. So let's crack on with this one then and see what we have. As always with my reviews then, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting, just fast forward. All the usual links are in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Apex Brewing Company before, and we will no doubt add more to that list in the near future. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and you can of course go into the channel homepage and search for beer based on geography. The whole channel has a geography based tagging system, so you can search for beer based on country, city, county, state, province, prefecture, whatever it is that takes your fancy, and you can of course check out the playlist of beers from different countries as well. You'll find this one in the Swedish playlist, and that will be added to in the coming days and weeks and months and so on. But yeah, as I say, always nice to return to Apex Brewing Company. So let's go on to my brewery notes and we'll talk a little bit about these guys. So Apex Brewing Company, as I've mentioned to you before, were originally based in Nora to the north of Örebro, although they're now based in Örebro itself, but the company was founded back in 2017 by Daniel Gatchis and Niklas Lundgren. So both of these guys are musicians. Niklas played in the band 59 Times the Pain, while Daniel played in The Voice of a Generation, but Daniel and Niklas are responsible for the brewing side of the company, while there are others involved in the business side of the operations. So this is Leif Carlson, Ola Eriksson and Roger Hjelm. They started off originally with just a very small operation, a 500 litre brew kit and 6 fermentation tanks, and at this point they were just selling their beers in the local area before they got them into Systembolaget. I believe that was actually in 2018 or so. I reviewed the very first beer that these guys released through Systembolaget, and that was the single hop, which was a Citra IPA if I remember rightly. But over the course of 2018 they brewed around 35,000 litres of beer, and this was about 25 different varieties during this time as well, all of which were New England hazy IPAs, and the following year in 2019 they brewed a total of 120,000 litres. Over the coming years they continued to develop new recipes and so on, and get their beer out there a little bit more across the European continent, and they were very successful with this. But if we go forward to summer of 2021, they announced that they were going to move to a new premises in the Baytorp district of Örebro in the autumn, and they have done that now, and this saw them upgrade their 500 litre brew kits to a 2,000 litre system. They've added several new tanks to that as well, and this has greatly increased their capacity. As I say, over the last few months since they've made that move, they've continued to grow their capacity even more. They've been adding more tanks and things like this, and as of October 2022, when I'm filming this review for you, they've produced 120 different kinds of beer. Over the last year or so, they've also been brewing some kind of lager beers and things like this as well. The Keller Pils and the Keller Märzen have been two notable ones. I think there are a few other ones out there as well that I haven't managed to get a hold of yet. But like I say, Apex Brewing are known mainly for their different kinds of, New England Hazy IPA, and that really is what's kind of propelled this brewery to the kind of stardom that they have these days. But like I say, a very, very well respected Swedish brewery these days, and one that you definitely need to check out if you haven't done so already. But that is all I can tell you about Apex Brewing Company for the moment. So if you want to learn more about these guys, check out the brewery website. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on. You can check out some of my older reviews as well, or you can have a look at the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about some of the different beers that these guys have done. But yeah, New England IPAs, this is one of the Swedish breweries that you definitely want to check out. So yeah, let's go on and have a little look at this beer itself. So this one, as you can see, is a 440ml can. Little look at the artwork for you there. You can see this one has a hippo biting the earth, nuclear option. I think that is obviously a reference to a certain crazy person who lives in the Kremlin at the moment, Mr. Putin. So yeah, nuclear option IPA. You can see one of the Apex slogans on the back there: music, people and beer. But yeah, 440ml can this. It cost me 50 Swedish kroner, which is about €5, somewhere in the region of £4 sterling, maybe $5.50, $5.75 American. And like I said, it was released as part of the Lokalt och småskaligt assortment through Systembolaget for October of 2022. So yeah, this should be quite interesting. To tell you the actual stats of the beer, I did write these down in my notes. So this one is hopped with Mosaic, Belma and Zappa, and it's got a malt base of Maris Otter Extra Pale, chip malt, and then torrefied oats and toasted oats. And I took a little bit of information on Belma and Zappa as well, because those hops have only featured on the channel once or twice before. So Belma is an American hop developed by Peterbough Farms in the Yakima Valley. It was released back in 2012. This gives you between 10 to 12% alpha acid, some orange flavours, bit of melon and a bit of strawberry in there. I've had Belma, 2 or 3 times, I have to say. Zappa is a hop that is quite new to me. This is an American hop named, of course, after Frank Zappa. 8% alpha acid. It gives you some passion fruit, and it gives you this big sort of minty menthol herbal type thing. So it's a bit of a difficult hop to get your head around, actually. But yeah, Mosaic, Belma and Zappa in this one. Mosaic we know quite well. 14% alpha acid, American. Big juicy tangerine notes and a little bit of earthiness for the most part. So this should be a really interesting combination. But yeah, nuclear option, New England Hazy IPA, 6.5% ABV. Let's get this guy out and see what it's going to offer us. Yeah, I think the last time I had Zappa was actually in an IPA that I tried from Zmajska Pivovara in Zagreb down in Croatia, and that was quite interesting, I have to say. But we'll need to see how it turns out in this beer, because I'm pretty sure that one that I tried from Zmajska was more of a West Coast IPA than a New England. But there we are. So let me just put this round like that. So anyway, as you can see, this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect from an Apex New England IPA. So before the head disappears, you can see that it has just slightly over a finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream ivory coloured head. I'll just let you guys have a little look at that on the video for yourself, but you can see a mix of kind of small bubbles in there and slightly more bumpy character towards the top of the head. That of course is going to fade away as we let the beer sit a little bit, but yeah, definitely a kind of cream ivory coloured head on this one. In terms of the colour of the beer, I would describe this as a mix between a sort of mango and pineapple juice. As you guys watching the channel know, I like to compare the colour of these beers to different fruit juices because, you know, the New England IPAs just remind me of those. But remember, the colour of your beer depends on 1, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. 2, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugar is caramelised and thus you get a darker colour of beer. Any barrel aging that you do or any adjuncts that you put into the beer will also play a role in that. But when it comes to different kinds of IPAs, you don't often have to care about those factors, of course. But yeah, in terms of this one, it is actually as well pretty opaque for when it comes to a 6.5%er. You guys can see that there. And remember, the level of haze in these New England IPAs depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree the yeast as well. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation, just one or two big bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass, a few little ones going up towards the bottom of the head there, but overall it does look pretty damn nice, I have to say. So yeah, in terms of what you would expect from a New England hazy IPA, this one pretty much gives you anything, or it gives you everything, I should say. But when it comes to the Apex ones, it is one of the slightly more, could we say it's a slightly more rich colour you get out of this one. Quite often the Apex beers are very bright and very yellow as well at the same time, but there's nothing wrong with that. It's certainly not out with the realms of possibility or acceptability when it comes to a New England hazy. But very nice looking beer, this one. Honestly, I don't think we need to say anything more about the appearance of it. Let's have a closer look at the aroma and just see what we get with this one then. So let's do this. Oh yeah, that's a very, very nice, I'm going to say straight away, it's a very nice New England hazy. As I've always explained to you, when it comes to New England hazies, for me, these beers can lean in 6 different directions. So, you know, you can have the more yeasty, farmhousey character, the kind of rye leaning, grainy sort of things. Those two characteristics are a bit more common when it comes to American brewed examples of the style. But you've also got barley malt notes in there. You've got a little bit of wheaty bitiness. You've got oaty creaminess, and you've also got a bit of sweetness. Those are a bit more common. Well, you find them in the American ones, but they are a bit more widespread in the European variants, brews of this style, of course. And quite often a New England IPA will display numerous characteristics that I've just described there. So for me, this one's quite interesting. On first aroma, it's actually it's got a lot of barley malt to it. There's a lot of bready character in there. It's also got a good degree of sweetness, and you can smell the oats and the wheat kind of thickening this beer out. So it's actually, the way it's striking me is that it's a very well-rounded New England IPA. You've got some nice grassiness in there. You've also got the big juicy fruitiness. Yeah, the way that everything goes together in this beer, I think is very, very nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, aroma wise, it is very nice. So let's break this down and actually describe it a wee bit more kind of in depth. So the backbone of the beer, you absolutely have a little bit of that kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. It's also got a little bit of the kind of floury character to it. You know, you get that little bit of that kind of fresh white bread crust with the flour on there. I really very much like that. In terms of the white bready character, I think that goes together very, very well. So yeah, you get a little bit of that kind of white bready character, which I guess is from the chip malt. The chip malt always gives you this kind of slightly dry but nice and fluffy white bread. I'm certainly getting that out of there. So bread crust, the fluffy white bread, you can smell the wheat on top of that just thickening out the beer. And the wheat in this case for me is very smooth, but you know, at the back of the nose you get a little bit of bitiness out of it. So lovely smooth wheaty notes out of it. A little bit of kind of, as I say, you've got a little bit more of a kind of wheaty bitey sort of thing out of it. And we also have that nice big oaty creamy character coming out of the beer as well. The oats in this beer, incidentally, are really interesting because you do get some of that nice creaminess out of it, but you also get a little bit of the dryness. And as I've always said, when it comes to New England IPAs, oats are a marker of how fresh your beer is. The more creamy the oats are, the fresher the beer is, the drier they are, the older it is. So this beer has a good little bit of creaminess to it as well, so it's obviously quite fresh and it has held up well. You know, when we've bought this from Systembolaget, we have to think, yeah, it's been sitting for a few weeks. This is just how it works with the Swedish system. But yeah, you do get a lovely kind of oaty creaminess out of the beer, but you do get a little bit of kind of dryness in there. And we also have some really nice Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy notes out of this beer. So it does have a slight degree of sweetness as well. But yeah, aroma wise, this beer I think is very, very nice. So yeah, malty, on the malty side of things, I think we've said everything that we need to. Let's focus on the hoppy side of the beer then before we actually taste it. So when it comes to the green component, for me, it's actually got quite a nice, rich, and kind of wet, oily green component to it. There's a little bit of earthiness in there, which I think is great. That's going to be coming from the mosaic in the beer. There's some nice floral components in there. It's also a little bit deeper in a way, but you've got some nice grassy components as well. So there's a little bit of floral bitey, there's a little bit of floral kind of spiciness to the beer. You've also got a little bit of grassy zestiness in there. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think, is, you know, pretty damn nice. So yeah, the way that that beer goes together is really nice in that sense. Lovely, bright, kind of grassy note to it, and I'd say it's like a wet, freshly cut grass, but there's also a little bit of a kind of floral note in there. So yeah, the way that that goes together, I think is quite nice. And the thing with this beer is you can tell that it relies mainly on late addition and dry hopping. As I've said with New England IPAs, when it comes to hopping, these rely mainly on late addition and dry hopping. So you've got three types of hopping. Early addition hopping within the first hour of the wort boil gives you mainly bitterness. Late addition hopping within the last half hour of the wort boil gives you a little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour and aroma. Dry hopping after the wort boil gives you all flavour and aroma. New England IPAs rely on the latter two. West Coast IPAs tend to use all three. The fact that the green component in this one is actually quite bright, that tells you that it's using mainly late addition and dry hopping. So that's that with this one. The brightness you get from the grassiness in this beer and the slight floral character behind that tells you that. But for me, the more that I smell of it, the more it leans toward the grassy side of things. But yeah, for me, when it comes to the fruity side of this beer, just to round off, there is a good little bit of that bright tangerine sort of thing. There's a bit of a soft tropical note behind that, you know, an apricot-y type note. But I do get a little bit of the kind of juicy strawberry from the Zappa in this one. I don't get so much of the kind of minty character from the Zappa, which is kind of interesting. I mean, let me just have a wee look at this. What are we supposed to get from the so it said, yeah, so Belma, we're supposed to get orange, melon and strawberry. Okay, so that maybe the slightly strawberry note is coming from the Belma for sure. And then yeah, the passion fruit could be coming from the Zappa. But I remember Zappa, the green component of Zappa was really kind of unusual in a way. It was a hop that was a bit difficult to like, to be honest with you. But the first impression that I have of this one is, yeah, you get the strawberry from the Belma and you get the tangerine orange juice from the Mosaic. So yeah, those are the two main fruits that I'm getting out of this one, but there is a wee bit of tropical fruit just behind it. So as I always say, take a wee bit of time to have a look at the aroma of this beer, of any beer, before you actually get stuck into it. But I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one and see what we have. So this is the Nuclear Option, a 6.5% New England IPA from Apex Brewing in Örebro, out to the west of Stockholm here in Sweden. Let's get stuck into this one. Slanje, skål, cheers. So, straight away, you do get that pungency of Zappa. I remember trying that beer from Zmajska in Zagreb and it was just so pungent. You get that right away with this beer. But I mean, in terms of a general New England IPA, and compared to what we've had from Apex before, I find this one quite smooth and quite oily and quite slick on first impression. It's another very, very solid New England IPA from them, and it is, in a way, it kind of balances out the Zappa hop quite well. It has things in there to kind of counter the big pungency of it, but what I will say is this beer does have quite a powerful green component very early on. And you know, the thing is, I was always a great fan of Chinook and Columbus back in the day, and you know, maybe in a way Zappa with its kind of almost minty notes could be an interesting addition to that, but still, as I say, it's quite you know, it's quite an unusual, it adds some kind of unusual flavours to the beer. So for me, when I think about the other Apex beers I've had in the past, this one's actually, you know, as I say, quite quirky and unusual in a lot of ways. but still, the overall beer itself, it rounds off and it's nice and juicy, it's nice and smooth, it's got the creaminess that you expect. Yeah, it is actually a solid New England. So once again, thumbs up to Apex Brewing. And this, in a way, it sort of shows you how skilled they are with this style, that they can take a hop as pungent as Zappa. And they've used cashmere in the past as well, which you also have to be quite careful with because it can just dominate a beer. It kind of shows you that these guys are very careful when it comes to their process, and they can figure out things to give you a solid all-round beer. This is another very example of that. So another very good example, I should say. Can't speak English these days, but yeah, I like this one. Interesting addition to the Apex range for sure. So yeah, let's go through this beer as we always do, break it down and explain the flavour properly. So we'll start with the middle third of your palate as we always do. So middle third of the palate with this beer. There's a nice little bit of kind of fresh white bready bread crust in there. You get that little bit of graininess toward the front of that middle third of your palate. You do get a little touch of woody character in there as well. So yeah, fresh white bready bread crust. There's a little bit of floury character in there, a little bit of woodiness, and yeah, that is the backbone of the beer. On top of that, you get a little touch of a kind of wholemeal brown bready sort of thing. And I found that this is something you can get with the chip malt in the beer. It can give you this little bit of almost wholemeal brown bready kind of thing. So a little bit of that sitting on top of the bread crusty backbone. Maybe above that there's a little touch of like a Jacob's cream cracker sort of thing, and then you have the white bready character coming out of the beer. So yeah, I do like how that goes together. You've got the lovely kind of white bready notes from the barley malt in there. So yeah, fresh bread crust, wholemeal brown bread, cracker, white bread. I think those are the base layers of the beer. But above that, you start to get a few other things which I think are quite interesting. So you can feel that dense layer of wheaty white bread to the beer. So you can feel that the kind of the chip malt is obviously going to contribute to this as well. Because if I remember rightly, chit is a variety of wheat. So yeah, the kind of the thicker layer of wheat that you get on top of all those bready malts in this beer is quite interesting. That just thickens out the whole beer. But then above that, you can feel the oats. You've got this kind of circle in the middle of your palate where you've got the oats. And if you go down the middle line of your tongue, it's actually really nice and really creamy. But as you move out further toward the edge of the palate there, you can feel the oats get a little bit drier. And as I've always said, the oats are a good indicator of how fresh your New England IPA is. The creamier they are, the fresher the beer is, the drier they are, the older it is. That's the basics of it. But yeah, you can feel in the dead centre palate, down the middle line of your tongue, you get that nice creamy oaty character out of the beer. Yeah, as you push further out from that, it's a little bit kind of drier and things. But on top of the oaty layer, you start to get some of the sweetness. And this beer actually, when I think about it, it does show you very well 4 different elements that you can have to the New England IPA. And in fairness, it does show you some others too. So yeah, I do quite like how that goes together. So on top of the kind of oaty layer of the beer, you can feel there's a nice little bit of kind of sweetness to it. You get that little oily circle sitting above the oats, and that's where you get the kind of sugary notes out of the beer. So in the dead centre of your palate, you can feel there's a little touch of an almost straight up caramel, and as you move out from that kind of centre of the middle of your palate, it starts to get quite it starts to become more kind of butterscotchy, butter candy like. So yeah, there is a nice little bit of a more kind of butterscotchy, butter candy note to this. So yeah, straight up caramel, a little bit more of a butterscotchy, butter candy sort of thing. And then as you move out toward the edges of the palate, you've got a little bit of a more kind of McVitie's digestive, biscuity kind of note to it. So you can feel there are different layers to the brown sugar there, and of course the complexity in this beer, to a degree, is in that middle third of your palate. So I quite like how that goes together. I think that's everything we need to say about the middle third of the palate in this beer. Let's go to the back third of the palate then. So the border region between middle third and back third of your palate, you get a nice little bit of a bready build up in there. and it is more of a white bready note, but you can feel that the bread crusty backbone to this beer, it's a little bit more kind of grainy and dry. It's a little bit more grainy and dry on that back third of the tongue. Above that, you start to get, you get a little bit more of that Jacob's cream cracker note thing there. And remember that trend, the further back on the palate you get, the more kind of dry and bitter flavours you get, but the further forward you go, the smoother and sweeter flavours you get. So more bread crust, a little bit of Jacob's cream cracker. On top of that, you start to get the kind of white bready layers out of this one. So you can feel that white bready layer is a lot taller and it's a lot more kind of airy. You do, in fairness, you know, that layer that I'm thinking about, there is a little bit of brown bready character in the base of that too, which I think is quite interesting. So yeah, you've got bread crust, you've got Jacob's cream cracker, a bit of brown bread, the white bread, and on top of all of that, you start to get some of the kind of wheaty aspects out of the beer as well. And the wheat does actually show you a little bit of bitiness on the back third of the palate too, so that's certainly quite interesting. Above all of that, you start to get some of the yeasty notes out of the beer. So you start to get that, as I say, that nice kind of white, yeah, you get that wheaty bitiness, but above that you start to get the more kind of farmhousey yeasty notes. And it's like a more airy white bread. There's a little touch of an almost honeycomb sweetness there, and just a little bit of this woodiness as well. So you can feel these kind of more yeasty white bready notes to this beer too. I'm not sure if this uses like a London fog yeast, like a WLP 66 or something along those lines, but it does, the yeasty character in this beer does feel quite familiar. But yeah, back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller, and again, as you come further forward, it just condenses down and squashes together. So yeah, the way that this beer goes together from that perspective, I think, is very, very nice. On the hoppy side of things then, let's look at this green component first. Back corners of the palate, there is a good little bit of earthiness there, and that is probably due to the presence of the mosaic. But as you move further forward, you start to get this, you get a fairly deep kind of floral note out of this one, and there's a lot of minty character to it, which again I think is down to the Zappa in the beer. So yeah, it's got quite a minty and floral type character to it, this beer. So yeah, the way that goes together, you've got a nice floral base, and the freshness that kind of lingers there, it really is quite minty in a lot of ways. So it's really, this beer is really interesting from that particular perspective. So yeah, it's kind of it really is interesting how all of that kind of pieces together in this particular beer. Yeah, so big floral base to the beer. It almost has a little bit of an early edition hop character to it, but the mintiness really gives it that kind of the mintiness almost gives you a wee bit of dankness there. So that's a really interesting perspective from the Zappa hop in this one. But as you go round the front curve of the palate, it's certainly lighter and more grassy and a little touch zesty as well. And all three of the hops will contribute to that. But let's look at the fruity side of the beer then, because there's a few interesting things going on there as well. So the border region between front third and middle third of the palate, again you get a little bit of a bready build up there. The base of the front third of your palate is a wee bit more kind of smooth and white bready. So, and then of course above that you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, fruity side of the beer for me. I have to say as well about this beer, it has grown on me the more that I've drank of it, in fairness. So if we go to the back of the front third of your palate, you know, you do get a little bit of this passion fruit. There is a little bit of a straight up passion fruit there, and as you come further forward from that, you start to get a kind of melony note, and I think that's due to the Belma. You know, Belma can give you that kind of passion fruity and melony sort of thing. So it's, yeah, a bit of passion fruit and a bit of an oily melon there. But as you go into the front half of that front third of your palate, you're definitely getting the big tangerine oranges that you expect of the mosaic, but you're also getting the kind of, you get a little touch of that kind of strawberry note from from Belma as well. So it's really interesting how that goes together. For me, the Zappa is really giving you a little bit more of the Zappa's really giving you more of the kind of green component of the beer, that more kind of minty sort of thing. So yeah, the way that that goes together in this beer is really quite interesting. I've not had too many encounters with either Zappa or Belma, and to have them both together, it really is a little bit of a, it's almost a little bit of a mindfuck in a way, because it really gets you thinking about the composition of the beer. But after 3,500 reviews, this is what you want. You want beers that are going to make you think a little bit and just, you know, process exactly what's going on. And this beer really has done that. So thumbs up to Apex for doing something quite different with this beer. Malt base wise as well, I think it is probably fairly similar to some of the ones we've had. We've had numerous beers from Apex over the last few years, and they've all been good, but the malt base that they've put together for this one actually balances things out very, very well. So yeah, flavour wise, this beer is quite nice. I like the mix of the passion fruit, the melon, the orange, and the kind of strawberry notes that it has going on. I think it works very, very well with the overall vibe of the beer, and that mintiness that you get from the Zappa in this beer is really quite interesting. But yeah, I think we can leave it at that for the flavour side of things. Let's round off this review with a wee look at the mouthfeel. So mouthfeel wise, I think this beer is pretty much right in the middle of the spectrum. Mid-bodied, smooth carbonation. To some degree, it's a little bit silky. It's not the creamiest of New England IPAs that we've had from Apex. Then again, it is only about 6.5% compared to some of the 8%ers and, you know, triple IPAs that we've had from them in the past. So not going to be the thickest one. In terms of IBUs, I get the feeling that it's a fairly standard 30 or maybe 40 at a push IBUs. You know, the Zappa and the mintiness that it gives you a little bit more of it gives you a bigger impression of bitterness, to be fair. That's most definitely a fair statement to make. The malt base is nice and smooth. There's a good little bit of sweetness in there as well that comes out later on, and you've got this nice kind of slightly juicy and oily fruity character. For me, I'm glad that I got this one because it is quite different from what we've had from Apex in the past, and it has made me think a little bit about Belma and about Zappa hops. So yeah, definitely a nice one to try, and something that's tested my palate a little bit. You can't ask for much more than that these days when it comes to New England IPAs. There are, frankly, too many of them on the market. But Apex, as I say, one of the solid Swedish producers. Have a go at some of their beers if you haven't already. So yeah, let's leave it at that for this one. So once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Apex Brewing Company as well are. And this one was the nuclear option. 6.5% New England, really interesting beer, mainly because of the hops and the way that they got the malt base to match those hops. So yeah, thank you again for watching. Check out my social media, check out Apex Brewing Company's social media, and we'll see you again soon. Slange, skull, and cheers.